Have you ever wondered what you'd do if your whole world depended on a single, impossible choice? If every door you opened was a risk, and every secret you kept could save a life or destroy it? My name is Carolyn, and for most of my life, I thought my family's story was just tradition. Until the day I discovered the truth and realized that survival isn't as simple as running away. What happened to me might sound unbelievable, but I promise you, every word is real. And somewhere out there, another girl is facing the same impossible choice right now. This isn't just my story, it's a journey through hidden dangers, unexpected heroes, betrayals, escapes, and a twist that even I never saw coming. And by the end, you'll see just how far someone will go, for freedom, for hope, and for the chance to rewrite a life everyone else tried to erase. So settle in, watch closely, because sometimes the most ordinary-looking families are hiding the most extraordinary secrets, and by the time we reach the end, you might see the world a little differently too. Chapter 1. The Unseen Prison. If you saw my family on the street, you'd never guess the truth. We looked just like any other immigrant family. My mom always smiling in her pressed hijab, my dad with his crisp shirt and tired, gentle eyes. To everyone else, we were good people. Inside our home, though, a very different story was unfolding, a story that almost no one would believe. In my family, a girl's body decided her fate. The moment a girl got her first period, she was celebrated with sweets and songs. But for us, it meant the end of childhood and the beginning of something we could never escape. "You're a woman now," my mother whispered, but it felt like a funeral, not a birthday. I learned the rules early. Obey, never speak at the table, serve your brothers and uncles in silence. If I dared make eye contact or let a plate clatter, the belt would whistle through the air. 10 lashes, never less. My hands bore scars from holding burning pots, my fingers blistered and numb because soft hands make a lazy wife. Even at night, the rituals continued, my mother coating my face with burning cream to make me fair and beautiful for a man I'd never even met. I watched my cousins disappear one by one. My cousin Mayam was only 12, just a child, when the blood came. 3 days later, she was promised to a man old enough to be her father. He'd already buried 2 wives before they turned 20. That night, while everyone else slept, I made a decision. If a girl's body was a ticking clock, I'd do everything I could to stop mine. I stopped eating. The other girls called me skeleton behind my back, but I wore their taunts like armor. What none of them knew was that every Friday, from 1 in the morning until nearly midday, I was forced to serve every meal in the house. I became invisible, a ghost gliding from kitchen to table to sink, never allowed to rest, never allowed to speak. Each mistake was punished swiftly and silently. No one told me we were living in America, the land of freedom, yet every night my world shrank to the size of a locked bedroom. My mother whispered that this was love, this was tradition, and girls who refused would die alone, unwanted and unloved. But I had questions. Why did Mayam's eyes go dull after her wedding? Why did the women in our family gather in hushed circles, always glancing over their shoulders? Why did my mother keep the wedding dresses hidden at the very back of her closet, never letting them out of sight? One morning, I caught my own reflection in the hallway mirror, skinny, haunted, and silent. My mother smiled, saying, "You'll make a perfect bride." In that moment, I felt something twist inside me, not pride, but a quiet, burning dread. I didn't know it then, but a secret war had already begun in our house. Every bruise, every whisper, every forbidden question, it was all part of a battle I'd have to fight alone. And then, something happened that changed everything. But I'll tell you that part in a minute. Chapter 2. Discovery and Awakening. You never forget the moment you realize your entire life has been a lie. It started with a mistake, or maybe it was fate. One morning at school, I was so exhausted from working all night that I forgot to change out of my loose, oversized t-shirt before rushing out the door. The teacher saw how skinny I was, the bones showing through my sleeves. She pulled me aside with a concerned look, but I shrugged it off and mumbled something about family stress. She didn't look convinced. That afternoon, she called me to her office, one-on-one, behind a closed door. I thought I was in trouble for breaking dress code. Instead, she sat me down, her voice gentle but serious. "You can tell me if something's wrong at home," she said. I shook my head and looked at the floor, terrified to say anything real. As she stepped out to take a phone call, I waited, staring at the desk. My stomach knotted with hunger and fear. That's when I noticed her desk drawer was slightly open. And inside, a stack of pamphlets and books with words that made my heart race. Your rights as a minor, when culture becomes crime, marriage laws in the US. I felt dizzy just reading the titles. I slid out the thinnest pamphlet and tucked it into my waistband. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear. When my teacher returned, I pretended nothing had happened, but I could hardly hear her words. All I could think about was the piece of paper burning against my skin. That night, in the safety of my locked bedroom, I read every single word. For the first time in my life, I learned that what was happening to me, what happened to Mayam, to Anna, to all of us, wasn't just unfair. It was illegal. No cultural exceptions, no tradition loopholes. I memorized every page, the phone numbers for help, the list of mandated reporters, the exact phrases that could trigger an investigation. I felt two things at once: hope and raw terror. If my family ever found out I had this, I knew what would happen, but something inside me had shifted. I couldn't unknow the truth. I realized I wasn't just a victim. I might be the only one who could make a difference. A few days later, I found myself in my uncle's dusty tool shed with 6 younger cousins, girls just like me, all desperate to avoid the same fate. My voice shook as I taught them what I'd learned, whispering the words that could change everything. Say these words to a teacher. Tell them you're being forced. It's not your fault. We practiced over and over, our voices barely more than a breath. They're making me marry. I'm only 13. Please help. I saw the fear in their eyes and the tiniest spark of hope. For the first time, we weren't just waiting to be chosen or punished. We were planning. We were fighting back. But secrets are hard to keep in a house full of spies. I started noticing things. Doors opening just a crack when I walked by, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. My mother asked why I was spending so much time outside. My aunt stared at me longer than usual, her eyes narrow with suspicion. One night, as I was slipping back inside from the shed, I heard footsteps in the dark hallway. My heart stopped. Was I being watched? That night, I barely slept. I clutched the pamphlet under my pillow, praying no one would find it. What I didn't know was that a storm was coming. I had started something I couldn't control. And soon, everything I knew would explode. But before that happened, there was one final irreversible moment that set my escape in motion. And it all started with a single drop of blood. Chapter 3: The Blood Price. You never know the exact moment your childhood ends until it happens to you. It was a Saturday morning, and I was doing what I always did, preparing breakfast for the men in my family, my hands moving on autopilot. That's when I felt something strange, a warm trickle down my leg. I glanced down, heart skipping a beat. There, staining my white dress, was the unmistakable mark of blood. Before I could react, my mother's sharp eyes caught it. Suddenly, she let out a piercing scream of joy. Within seconds, every woman in the house was crowding around me, kissing my cheeks, congratulating me as if I'd won some great prize. But I only felt numb, like I was watching my own life happen from somewhere far away. By nightfall, my fate was sealed. My father had already chosen my husband, Hamoud Habibi. He was a construction mogul, much older, much richer, and he'd already buried 2 wives before they turned 23. They said it was kidney failure, but the women whispered the truth. Too many pregnancies, too young. I barely slept that night. My mind raced with panic and guilt, because the day before, my cousin Anna had also started her period. By evening, she was promised to a 51-year-old man who collected wives like trophies. I saw the light drain from her eyes as the adults discussed her bride price, like she was livestock at an auction. That's when I knew I had to do something, no matter the risk. That night, in the tool shed, I slipped Anna my secret notebook. Inside were all the numbers, addresses, and phrases I'd memorized, the map to our only hope. I pressed it into her shaking hands and whispered, "Tomorrow, tell your science teacher. Use the exact words I taught you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. As for me, I told myself I still had 2 weeks before my own wedding, 2 weeks to figure out an escape. But I was wrong. Because that very night, there was a heavy knock at the door. It was Child Protective Services. Someone, maybe a teacher, maybe Anna herself, had triggered an investigation. My father's face went from confusion to fury as they asked about underage brides and forced marriages. I watched as all the adults in my family circled up, their eyes darting from face to face, desperate to find out who had betrayed them. Within an hour, they found my notebook in the tool shed. My father burned it in front of everyone, calling me diseased, contaminated, a cancer that must be cut out. Then, with a voice like ice, he announced, "The wedding is tomorrow," before she poisons anyone else. That night, as I lay in bed, every muscle tense and my mind racing, I knew I was running out of time. Dawn would bring the beginning of the end. The footsteps in the hallway sounded closer than ever. I could hear my mother and aunts whispering outside my door, making plans I was never supposed to hear. All I had was a plastic bag with a change of clothes, a few stolen dollars, and the address of a shelter memorized word for word. My entire life was about to change, and I had no idea if I would survive what came next. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let them decide my future, even if I had to risk everything to escape. Chapter 4. The Escape. The morning of my wedding, the sky was gray, almost as if the world itself knew what was coming. My mother burst into my room before sunrise, already dressed in her finest clothes, her eyes shining with an excitement that made my stomach turn. "Get up," she snapped. "The beautician will be here in 30 minutes. I forced myself to groan and doubled over, clutching my stomach. "Mama, something's wrong. It really hurts." In our culture, a sick bride was a bad omen. I let my tears flow, letting fear fuel every shaky breath. "Please," I whimpered. "I need the bathroom. I think I'm going to throw up." She frowned, torn between irritation and superstition, and finally let go of my arm. "5 minutes," she barked. "Don't make a scene." I stumbled down the hall, barely holding the hidden bag under my nightgown. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and immediately climbed onto the toilet. Above me, a ceiling tile I'd loosened days before shifted just enough for me to shove my bag inside. I ran the tap, flushed the toilet, moaned in pain, anything to make the act believable. My mother pounded the door. "Hurry up!" But I was already on the toilet again, staring at the small window painted shut years ago. I reached for the butter knife I'd stolen, wedged in the crack, and began scraping. Paint flaked. My heart pounded. Please, just a little more. Suddenly, multiple fists began pounding the door, my aunts joining in. "She's taking too long." Then I heard my father's voice, colder than winter. "Break it down." With one final shove, the paint cracked and the window slid open. The opening was tiny, meant for ventilation, not escape, but months of starvation had made me small enough. I shoved my bag out first, then squeezed through, my shoulders scraping raw against the frame. The lock splintered just as my hips cleared the window. I dropped 6 feet to the wet grass below, my ankle twisting with a white-hot jolt of pain. But I didn't stop. I ran barefoot across the backyard, nightgown flying behind me, every muscle burning. Behind me, the bathroom exploded in angry shouts. My family had realized what I'd done. Dogs barked, lights flickered on, voices echoed my name. Every house on our street was a potential enemy. I cut through the neighbor's yard, blood pooling from a gash in my heel, then ducked behind garbage bins as headlights swept the alley. My cousin's voice carried through the air. "She couldn't have gone far." I'd mapped this route 100 times, but never like this. Never with my heart threatening to explode from terror. I darted between cars, my feet leaving bloody prints on the sidewalk. I could hear car engines revving, tires screeching. They were hunting me. A car skidded to a stop at the corner. I dove into a rose bush, thorns tearing at my skin, but I stayed hidden as my uncle's truck crawled past, headlights searching for any sign of movement. Finally, I saw it. The bus stop. The morning bus was just pulling in. I burst from my hiding place, waving frantically, nightgown streaked with blood and grass. The driver, an older woman with kind eyes, hesitated only a second before opening the door. "Please," I begged. "I need to get downtown." I reached for the money in my bag. and realized, with horror, I'd left it behind in my rush. An elderly woman in the front row quietly paid my fare and guided me to a seat beside her. She didn't ask questions. She simply handed me tissues and squeezed my hand. As the bus pulled away, I caught a glimpse of my cousin's face outside, twisted in rage. I ducked below the window, heart racing, as the woman shielded me from view. We rode in silence until the city, her silent comfort anchoring me through the pain. When she got off, she pressed a $10 bill into my hand and whispered, "Whatever you're running from, don't ever go back." I stepped off the bus at the courthouse, leaving a trail of blood behind me. The marble floor felt cold and unforgiving under my feet as I limped to the counter. The clerk took one look at me and left her post to help. "Emergency protective order," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "They're forcing me to marry. Please, I'm only 15. Within minutes, a judge signed the order, his face somber as he read the details. "You're safe now," he promised. I wanted to believe him, but I kept looking over my shoulder. The threat of my family finding me was everywhere, as real as the pain in my body. But for the first time in my life, I had a piece of paper that said, I belonged to myself. As I limped out into the morning air, one thought burned in my mind. I had survived the impossible. But I knew deep down the real fight had only just begun. Chapter 5. Nowhere Feels Safe. Freedom, it turned out, didn't feel like I expected. It felt cold, raw, and lonely, my body shaking as I stepped onto the courthouse steps with nothing but a slip of paper, $10, and bloody feet. The city buzzed around me, but I'd never felt more invisible or more exposed. I called the only shelter number I'd memorized, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold the phone. My voice cracked as I explained, "I just got a protective order. My family, they're looking for me. Please, I have nowhere to go." The woman on the line sounded kind, but her words hit like ice. "I'm sorry, honey. We're completely full until Thursday. I can put you on the wait list." Thursday. 3 days felt like an eternity. I hung up, numb with fear, and thought about sleeping on a park bench. That's when I remembered Ms. Rodriguez, my teacher, the one who'd accidentally changed everything by leaving those pamphlets unlocked. Maybe it hadn't been an accident at all. Desperate, I rode 3 buses across town, limping through unfamiliar streets, my feet raw and bleeding. It was Saturday, but her car was parked outside the school. I found her in her classroom, grading papers with tired eyes. When she looked up and saw me, she dropped her pen. "Oh my God." She rushed to my side, helped me into a chair, and immediately grabbed the school nurse's kit. As she cleaned the glass from my foot and bandaged my cuts, I broke down, real ugly tears this time, not the silent ones I'd learned to hide at home. "They were going to marry me off today," I sobbed. "He already killed 2 wives. The shelter's full. I don't know where to go." She hugged me, her arms steady as a wall, and then started making phone calls, CPS, social workers, legal aid, but the answers were all the same. Without more evidence of immediate physical danger, we can't move forward. I felt hope flicker and nearly die. They needed proof, not just scars on my hands or stories from my lips, but something concrete, something undeniable. Suddenly, my phone rang, my mother's number, then my father's, then relatives I barely knew. Each voicemail came in faster than the last. Ms. Rodriguez snatched the phone from my shaking hand. "They're tracking you," she said. "Wipe it. Factory reset now?" As I fumbled with the settings, she kept calling every contact she had. The answers didn't change. And then, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Voices, angry and familiar. "We know she's here!" My father's voice was calm and calculated, speaking both Arabic and English, talking about how I was sick, mentally unstable, kidnapped by Western ideas. My uncles joined in, knocking on classroom doors, insisting I needed medication. Ms. Rodriguez's hands shook as she called 911, whispering, "Please hurry." I tried to be brave, but my heart was thundering in my chest. She asked me quietly, "Do you have proof?" Wordlessly, I rolled up my sleeves, revealing circular burn scars from the pots and fresh belt marks from the morning's struggle. She took photos, her hands trembling almost as much as mine. Police arrived within minutes, separating me from my family. My father, standing outside the classroom with prescription bottles, put on his concerned parent act. "My daughter is delusional," he pleaded to the officers. She's sick, she makes up stories, please, we just want to take her home. But this time, there were witnesses. The school security footage showed my father arriving with prescription bottles, my uncles fanning out to find me. Ms. Rodriguez pulled out my essays, the ones where I'd hidden cries for help between descriptions of cultural traditions. The officers listened as she described the change in my behavior, the signs she'd missed, the rules she'd finally realized weren't just strict parenting. The tide started to turn. One of the officers, reading the essays and looking at my wounds, grew visibly uncomfortable. "We're placing her in emergency protective custody," he announced. As they escorted me out, my father erupted, shouting curses in Arabic, swearing I would regret betraying my blood. I didn't look back, but my heart broke a little as I saw my mother's face, her expression caught between rage, heartbreak, and something I still can't name. I spent that night in a strange woman's guest room, clutching a police report and my teacher's phone number, jumping at every sound. I didn't feel safe, but I was alive, and for the first time, there was a thin line of hope threading through my fear. I knew my family wouldn't give up, but now, neither would I. Chapter 6. The hunt never ends. I thought that with the police, social workers, and a court order behind me, the nightmare would finally be over. I was wrong. My first night in emergency foster care was a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. The woman who took me in, Theodora, a retired nurse, was kind, but her house felt more like a fortress than a home. Security cameras at every corner, motion lights in the yard, locks on every window. "You're safe here," she promised. I wanted to believe her, but I spent hours staring out the window, expecting headlights to sweep the street or familiar voices to echo through the night. I barely slept. Every car passing made me flinch. I kept replaying my father's threats, my mother's tearful face, and my cousin's eyes. Some scared for me, others angry and betrayed. The next morning, Theodora handed me a new phone and drilled me on emergency numbers. What to do if someone tried to approach the house, which neighbors to trust. "You can't go to school, not yet," she said. "It's too easy for them to find you." But my family was already adapting. They sent flowers, cards, and even food to Theodora's house, all with carefully written notes. "Come home, your grandmother is ill, we forgive you, let's talk." Theodora took photos of everything and tossed it in the trash. "This is manipulation. Don't let them draw you in." Within days, things escalated. My father hired lawyers, filing petitions to have me returned for parental alienation, claiming I'd been brainwashed by outsiders. Every legal document was another attempt to pull me back, each one more aggressive than the last. My social worker, Margaret, called it standard. They want to exhaust you, intimidate you into surrendering. But that wasn't the worst part. It was the online campaign that broke my heart. My old social media accounts were hacked. Suddenly, posts appeared with pictures of me looking pale and tired, captions describing my mental breakdown, claims that I was kidnapped by strangers who hate our culture. My face was everywhere in my community's WhatsApp groups, with warnings to pray for the sick girl who's lost her way. And then, betrayal. My own cousin, Margie, the girl I'd tried to protect, appeared in a video with her mother reading a prepared statement. She told us terrible lies. She made us scared of our parents. "If you see her, help bring her home so she can get help." My chest ached watching her, her voice flat, her eyes empty. Theodora held me as I cried, her hands steady on my back. "They're using guilt," she said softly. "They want you to break." One night, as I tried to sleep, a neighbor called Theodora. "There are men taking pictures of your house." By the time police arrived, they were gone, but muddy footprints trailed through the garden. Margaret suggested moving me again, but Theodora refused. "They want us to run. We stay, we document, we fight." And then came the scariest moment yet. Early one morning, the security system went off, glass shattering from my bedroom window. Theodora yelled, "Bathroom, lock yourself in!" I sprinted down the hall as unfamiliar voices shouted in Arabic, doors slamming, footsteps pounding the floor. The bathroom door shook as someone tried to break it down. I clutched a can of hairspray, barely able to breathe, counting the seconds until sirens pierced the dawn. The police came fast. The men were gone by the time officers stormed inside, but the message was clear. I would never be truly safe as long as my family refused to let go. That day, Margaret came to move me to a new safe house even farther away. As I packed, I found a note slipped under my door. Just 2 words. Never stop. I didn't know who left it. Maybe Theodora, maybe someone else, but it became my mantra. Because running wasn't enough. Hiding wasn't enough. I realized I had to fight. Not just for myself, but for all the girls still trapped, still afraid, still believing they had no choice. The war for my freedom had just gone from private to public. And I was about to find out how many people were willing to risk everything to keep girls like me safe. Chapter 7. The Courtroom. Twist. Walking into the courtroom, I felt like I was entering a lion's den. Every bench was packed with family. Mine and others from our community, faces twisted with anger or sadness. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing her eyes, my father whispering to the lawyer. Even now, even after everything, I felt a pang of longing for a different life, one where parents would fight for you, not against you. My father's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a loving family destroyed by Western brainwashing. He called on community leaders, the imam, even my old pediatrician, who all insisted I'd always been cared for. The lawyer's voice dripped with concern as he described my mental instability, suggesting my wild stories were just a cry for help. I thought I was prepared. I had scars on my arms, stories in my essays, and the support of Ms. Rodriguez and Theodora. But as I took the stand, facing rows of people who wanted me silenced, my voice trembled. Patricia, my lawyer, steadied me. Just tell the truth. I described the beatings, the burns, the fear that had been my shadow since childhood. I described Mayam, Anna, and all the cousins whose lives had been traded away. The judge listened, silent but attentive. When Patricia presented the security footage of my father arriving at school with pills and fake concern, I saw the first crack in his mask. Then came the cross-examination. My father's lawyer twisted my words, suggesting Ms. Rodriguez planted ideas in my head. He waved essays in the air, mocking my exaggerations and asking why I hadn't told anyone sooner. I almost faltered. Almost. But just as I was about to break, the doors swung open. All heads turned. A woman in a hijab entered, walking with a slight limp, followed by a CPS worker. She was younger than my mother, but her eyes looked ancient. "My name is Fatima Habibi," she said quietly. My heart stopped. I knew that name. She was supposed to be dead, the first wife of the man I'd nearly been forced to marry. "I didn't die," Fatima said, her voice trembling but growing stronger. "When I was 15, I was married to Hamad Habibi. By the time I was 20, my kidneys were failing from too many pregnancies. My family told everyone I'd died, but a nurse helped me escape. I've been hiding for 5 years. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, angry shouts from my father's side of the family. The judge slammed her gavel. "Order!" Fatima held up medical records, old hospital bracelets, even a photograph of her own grave, an empty plot in another state. "They wanted to erase me," she said, her voice breaking. But I couldn't let them erase her too. Suddenly my story wasn't just words, it was proof, living and breathing. I watched my father's face turn to stone. My mother bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. Fatima's testimony cut through every lie, every accusation of insanity or rebellion. When the judge finally spoke, her words felt like the sun breaking through after a storm. "The evidence is clear. The protective order will be permanent. Any violation will result in criminal charges. This child is not to be contacted by her parents or extended family." As I left the stand, my father's voice followed me, soft, dangerous, final. "You are dead to us. You have no family." But Fatima caught my hand in the hallway. "You're not alone," she whispered. "There are more of us than you think." For the first time in years, I believed it. Chapter 8. The Fallout and the First Spark of Hope. For a moment, after the judge's ruling, it felt like I could finally breathe. No more looking over my shoulder. No more waking in the night to the sound of phantom footsteps. But I was wrong. The war wasn't over. It was changing. My family moved fast. Since they couldn't reach me directly, they found other ways to retaliate. The first blow landed through the screen, a tidal wave of hate on social media. My face, sometimes smiling, sometimes looking broken, was plastered everywhere, along with posts about my supposed breakdown and the terrible lies I'd spread. They called me sick, brainwashed, evil. My old friends and neighbors posted prayers for my healing. The comments cut deep. Then came the lawsuits. Every week, a new letter arrived. Defamation, alienation of affection, even corruption of minors. All baseless, my lawyer said, but each one expensive and terrifying. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, an endless reminder that I was still being hunted, just in different ways. The attacks grew bolder. One morning, Theodora found footprints by the side window, and police discovered someone had tried to jam the lock. The next week, a car parked across the street burst into flames. Firefighters found burned dolls dressed as child brides in the trunk. The message couldn't have been clearer. But for every attack, there was an answer I hadn't expected. It started with a package. No return address, just a battered envelope. Inside were photos of a young woman in nursing scrubs, smiling at her graduation. A shaky note. 5 years of hiding, but I built a life. I found love, safety, and purpose. Stay strong, Fatima. Tears ran down my face as I realized survival was possible. And then, a call that changed everything. "I found your notebook," a young voice whispered. "There are 6 of us. Can you help?" I froze, then wrote down every detail as she described their fears, their plans, their hope. With Theodora and Ms. Rodriguez, I started making information packets, pamphlets hidden in textbooks, hotline numbers disguised as math problems, legal facts tucked inside library books. We distributed them quietly, passing them to school nurses and counselors, knowing that for every 10 thrown away, one might save a life. Soon it was clear the network was growing. Girls I'd never met reached out for help. Teachers and social workers started contacting me, asking how they could help protect at-risk students. The legal battles raged on, but so did the ripple of hope. Each message, each rescued girl, was a tiny rebellion, a whisper that things could be different. But my family still wasn't finished. They made a public announcement in the community newsletter. I was disowned, erased from family trees, my name and photos to be removed from every home. To them, this was worse than death, total erasure. And strangely, I felt relief. They had finally played their last card. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of being forgotten. I was free to become someone new, but freedom comes with a price. And a responsibility. The network was growing. More girls were risking everything to break their silence, to build a world outside the walls that tried to trap them. As I packed my few belongings to move again, my new phone buzzed. Another message, another girl, another chance to fight back, to offer hope. Chapter 9. Turning survival into a movement. I used to think the bravest thing I'd ever do was escape my family. But I was wrong. True courage was deciding not to run anymore. As the legal storms died down, something new took root. The Freedom Network. It began as a handful of volunteers. Theodora, Ms. Rodriguez, Patricia, my lawyer, and a few teachers who had quietly helped girls like me for years. But it didn't stay small for long. We met in borrowed classrooms, behind locked doors, everyone's phones in airplane mode. We mapped out safe houses, planned escape routes, and created new ways to share vital information. Girls came from different backgrounds, some wearing hijabs, some not, some barely speaking English, others American-born. All carried the same fear in their eyes, and the same stubborn hope. But the threats didn't stop. My father's lawyer staged a press conference, calling me a corrupter of children, accusing me of leading girls astray. Community elders stood behind him, shaking their heads, warning families to guard their daughters against outside influences. Our network was accused of destroying culture and family values. Then came the scariest moment yet, a message from a girl named Samira, who was about to be sent out of state. Her family was planning to marry her off abroad, making her disappear for good. I coordinated with Margaret and Patricia, and for hours we waited in a parked car outside the courthouse, hoping, praying Samira would find a way. She did. Just as her aunts marched her toward the building, she dropped to the ground, screaming in fake pain, one of the tricks we'd practiced through whispered late-night calls. Security intervened, and she clung to a police officer, repeating the phrase, "They're forcing me to marry." In the chaos, CPU workers rushed in, her aunts shouting, but Samira wouldn't let go. They placed her in emergency custody. When I saw her afterwards, her face was streaked with tears, but alive with hope. But for every girl we saved, another was moved out of state, silenced, or made to recant her story. My own social media was flooded with videos. Girls from my wife's skills group reciting lines about how I lied, how I'd made them hate their families. The guilt cut deep. There were days I almost believed I'd done more harm than good. But then, hope arrived in the most unexpected form. An article published online told my story, anonymously, but with all the details right. Suddenly, messages poured in from survivors across the country. Women who'd run, women who'd stayed, teachers who'd suspected but never known what to do. Some wanted to join our network. Others just wanted to say, "Thank you for speaking up. I thought I was alone." One afternoon, Theodora handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a list of names. Girls who'd been saved, some as young as 12, all alive and starting over. Taped to the list was a single photo. Fatima, the dead first wife, now in blue hospital scrubs, smiling with her own little girl in her arms. The next day, our network held its first official meeting. 15 women and girls, some laughing, some crying, all determined to protect those still trapped. We agreed on one thing. We wouldn't just fight to save ourselves. We'd fight for every girl who thought there was no hope. I looked around the table and felt something I hadn't felt since childhood. A sense of family. Not the family I'd been born into, but the one I had chosen. A family built on truth, survival, and the unbreakable belief that freedom is worth any price. But I knew, as we planned our next moves, that my old life wasn't done with me yet. There would be new threats, new battles, more girls in danger. My family hadn't forgiven or forgotten, and they never would. But this time, I wasn't facing them alone. Chapter 10, The Legacy of Hope. If you think stories like mine have a tidy ending, let me tell you the truth. Survival is only the beginning. The Freedom Network grew faster than any of us dreamed. What started as secret pamphlets hidden in library books became a real organization. We partnered with social workers, nurses, and survivor advocates. We set up encrypted hotlines, safe word codes for girls who needed help in a moment's notice, and even trained teachers to spot the warning signs others had missed in me. But for every girl we reached, there was always another on the edge, one message away from vanishing forever. The threats didn't disappear. Sometimes I'd get a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We know where you are." Some nights, I'd spot a car idling at the end of the block, headlights off, engine humming in the dark. Margaret, our social worker, insisted on rotating safe houses. The police taught us how to scan for tracking devices, how to sweep for bugs. At times, the fear felt endless, but so did the hope. One day, a letter arrived, no return address. Inside was a snapshot. A group of young women in caps and gowns, arms around each other, beaming at the camera. On the back, a single line, "We made it because of you." I stared at the photo for a long time, the ache in my chest slowly changing into pride. The biggest twist came not from my family, but from the community itself. One night at a vigil, a woman I'd never met approached me, her daughter in tow. "You saved her life," she whispered, tears glinting in her eyes. "I used to believe everything they said about you. Now I know better." Word spread. Other families, quietly at first, began to reach out for help. Some fathers, secretly horrified by what happened to me, started asking questions, pushing back against traditions that had gone unquestioned for generations. But my own family never relented. The final blow came in the form of a glossy envelope, a new family tree, my name scrubbed out, my childhood photos returned in silence. The pain stung, but I realized something in that moment. They could erase me from their story, but they could never erase what I'd done for others. The Freedom Network's first annual gathering brought together over 100 girls, some who'd escaped, others who'd helped. We cried, we laughed, and we promised to never stop fighting for the next girl. For every threat, there were now dozens of allies. For every closed door, there were windows opening across the country. And there were more surprises. Anna, the cousin I'd thought lost forever, showed up at that first gathering, hugging me so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. Fatima spoke, her daughter in her arms, telling every girl in the room, "You are not invisible. You are not alone." I realized then that freedom isn't about forgetting your scars. It's about showing them so others know they can heal too. My old life will never fully let me go, but I'm not running anymore. I'm fighting alongside hundreds of others to make sure no girl has to choose between silence and survival ever again. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, maybe this is the sign you were waiting for. Maybe you're the one who'll help the next girl find her way out. Or maybe you're the girl who needs to know you are not alone. You are never beyond hope. If you've made it this far, thank you for sharing this journey with me. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell or to hear, but I truly believe every time we talk about the hard things, we open a door for someone else to find hope. If this story touched you, or if you have thoughts, experiences, or encouragement to share, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your words might help someone else who needs to know they're not alone. And if you want to be part of more stories that matter, that challenge, that inspire, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Together, we can build a space where every voice is heard and no one has to walk their path alone. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community. I can't wait to hear your story too.